on Prime Crime.
911, what's emergency?
There's a guy unresponsive in the snow. Don't know if he's breathing.
A house party with friends becomes a real-life murder mystery.
It's very similar to the game of Clue. We have all these pieces and all of the players, but we're not yet sure who did what.
Was this a crime in the heat of the moment? Or a cold-blooded cover-up?
You knew at that time, Trooper Proctor, that this was not going to implicate in any way, shape, form, or fashion another cop, correct?
Correct.
And will a storm on social media and even outside the courthouse change the outcome? Hey there, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and welcome to Prime Crime, where we break down the most compelling and memorable true crime cases from across the country. When 46-year-old Boston police officer John O'Keefe turns up dead on the lawn of another brother in blue, figuring out what happened becomes a national obsession.
Can't believe Sergeant Good.
Hi, my name is Carrie. I'm calling because my friend's boyfriend did not come home last night. They were at Waterfall, and now she is calling me hysterical because she doesn't know where he is. You didn't pick anybody up by the name of John O'Keefe, did you?
John O'Keefe?
Yeah, he's a Boston cop.
No, we didn't lock anybody up or anything like that.
So this all started on January 28th, 2022. Karen Reed and her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, went out to the Waterfall Bar and Grill, a small bar in Canton, Massachusetts, drinking with some friends.
It's about 15 miles south of downtown Boston. It has a very kind of small town feel to it. It is a lot of public service people, cops, firefighters, EMTs.
John O'Keefe is a 46-year-old police officer with the Boston Police Department, well-liked, well-respected in the community. He took over guardianship of his niece and nephew when his sister and brother-in-law passed away. People describe John as the type of guy that would literally give you the shirt off his back. Karen Reed is a 44-year-old equity analyst and adjunct professor living in nearby Mansfield.
She was highly educated, certainly presented well in terms of, appearance and how she carried herself.
They met a couple decades ago, kind of went their separate ways. During COVID, they get back together and there's some rocks in the relationship.
Now, let's fast forward to the fateful night of January 28th, 2022.
They go out, by all accounts, they have a lot of drinks. They are both fairly intoxicated. There's surveillance footage from the bar that kind of shows them drinking, having a good time, nothing really out of the ordinary.
Reed and O'Keefe leave the Waterfall Bar and Grill around midnight to travel to the home of Brian Albert, where there's an after party. Partygoers see Karen's SUV arrive at the Alberts' home around 12:15. She leaves around 12:30, but nobody ever sees Karen or John go inside the residence.
It was snowing that night, and it was snowing pretty hard. At some point, it was blizzard conditions. Visibility was poor.
Karen Reed drives ostensibly from the Alberts' house back to John O'Keefe's house, where she's staying that night. And between basically 12:40-ish and 5 o'clock, she calls him 53 times.
John, I'm going home. I cannot babysit you. I need to go home.
She leaves him 8 voicemails.
You are too busy right now. Another girl sleeping next to me. You're a loser. Yourself.
The niece then makes a phone call first to Carrie Roberts, a friend of both John O'Keefe and Karen Reed, saying John didn't come home, Karen's really upset, and Karen Roberts heard Karen Reed sort of in a heightened state in the background of that call.
Carrie Roberts meets Karen at John's house, where she calls 911.
They were out having drinks, and then she left and expected him to come home at some point, and he never did.
He just didn't come home last night.
No.
Is this common sometimes?
Exactly.
Happen with him?
No. That's kind of why she's more freaking out.
And along with Jennifer McCabe, the trio of women go out looking for John O'Keefe on the morning of January 29th.
The three of them end up together in a car. Jen and Carrie in the front seat, Karen in the back seat. They drive to 34 Fairview, and as they're pulling up to the house, Karen Reed starts screaming and kicking the door and runs out of the car and runs to what Carrie Roberts said was a snowbank. And then Carrie Roberts said, this woman is crazy. What is she doing? And then realizes that in that snowbank is John O'Keefe. She said he was buried under inches of snow.
How did Karen Reed know exactly where to look? Maybe at some point she had a flash of memory. For whatever reason, that's where she went. She's kind of in hysterics. Jen McCabe calls 911.
911, what's emergency?
I need someone to come immediately to 34 Fairview Road, Canton, Mass.
What's going on?
There's a guy unresponsive in the snow. I just pulled up and found him.
Karen Reed started lifting up her shirt to do skin to skin to try and warm him up, started performing CPR.
I know, I'm on the phone with the ambulance. I know, honey, I know. So, Carrie, you got to get off him, honey. Carrie, you got to get off of him.
Is there any bleeding or anything? Maybe hit his head out?
Yes, possibly. There seems to be bleeding in the face.
Okay, bleeding from the face. All right.
One of the women is doing CPR. It doesn't seem to be breathing.
Just give us a call back if he becomes responsive, right? But we're on the way.
He is in dire condition by the time EMTs arrive. A number of EMTs arrive.
At 6:23 a.m., John O'Keefe is transported to receive medical attention. He has minor abrasions. He has a bruise on the back of his right hand, but mostly what we're looking at is multiple skull fractures. He also has 2 black eyes, and those can be consistent with head trauma.
John O'Keefe was transferred to the hospital, and he was declared dead. Now, law enforcement has to figure out what on earth happened to him.
Police officers arrive. The snow is really coming down now. It's really a blizzard now. And it's just kind of this frantic scene. Over the course of those frantic several minutes, Karen Reed said some version of the words, "Did I hit him? Could I have hit him?" Plus, they had confiscated her car, and she had a broken taillight, and there were pieces of taillight found on the ground near John's body. And so that seems to be the evidence early on that made them say Karen Reed was their suspect.
On February 1st, Karen Reed is arrested and charged with second-degree murder, manslaughter while operating a vehicle under the influence of alcohol, and leaving the scene where personal injury or death occurred. Karen pleads not guilty to these charges.
But could something else have happened to John O'Keefe other than Karen Reed hitting him with her car and leaving him to die in the snow?
Really, in this case, we're left with more questions than answered. First of all, was this an accident or a homicide? And what was it that O'Keefe actually went through? Was he struck by a vehicle? Were his injuries the result of some type of altercation? What's the motive here? We don't really know at this point.
Up next, we'll take a closer look at what might have happened in a case filled with twists and turns.
Did you hear my client repeating the phrase, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him"?
No, I didn't hear that.
If you had heard that statement, you likely would have written it down, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Defendant responded, "You're hot." I responded, "Are you serious or messing with me?" Defendant responded, "No, I'm serious." I responded, "Failing is mutual. Is that bad? How long have you thought that?"
Karen Reed has been charged with the murder of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. But there are multiple theories as to what actually happened on the night of January 28, 2022, after Reed, O'Keefe, and their friends left the Waterfall Bar and Grill for the home of Brian Albert.
One theory is that Karen Reed struck John O'Keefe with her Lexus SUV at the home of Brian Albert and then fled, leaving John O'Keefe in the snow. If Karen has in fact hit John or struck him with her vehicle, these are blizzard-like conditions out. Was this intentional or could it be an accident?
As we explore these theories, we need to get a better idea of what was happening in the Albert home.
The Alberts were having a party, so the party has a number of friends and family there. It was kind of going on throughout the night. People were kind of coming and going.
Jennifer McCabe is Nicole Albert, the homeowner's sister. So she and her husband, Matt, were out that night with everybody and then also back at the after party.
Brian Albert Jr., the son of the homeowners, was celebrating his birthday the night of the gathering.
Colin Albert, he is Brian Albert, the homeowner's nephew. Colin went back to the house to wish his cousin Brian a happy birthday and then got a ride home.
On the morning now of January 29th, John O'Keefe and Karen Reed, they get into Karen Reed's car, and she apparently drives over to the home of Brian Albert. That's kind of where the story gets a little bit murky, because according to Karen Reed, she drops him off, O'Keefe goes inside the house.
But nobody ever saw John O'Keefe actually enter the home. She returned to John O'Keefe's residence and went to sleep, woke up around 4:30 or so in the morning and realized he wasn't there. She then panics that he's not there. Karen Reed called Jen McCabe and Carrie Roberts, and the three of them decide to drive back over to 34 Fairview to see if they can find John.
And sure enough, she finds him at 34 Fairview in a snowbank, basically in the throes of hypothermia. Maybe she accidentally backed into John O'Keefe and knocked him out, and he died. They are both fairly intoxicated.
But what if it wasn't an accident?
You have some people that said Karen Reed and John O'Keefe are on the outs. Their relationship is falling apart, and at that point, she's made the decision, it's over, she's furious at him, they're done.
She calls John multiple times throughout the evening, doesn't answer, and she leaves a series of angry messages.
John, I'm done with your kid. Nobody knows what the you want. Yeah, it's 1 in the morning. I'm with your niece and nephew.
We're left wondering, would Karen make these calls to cover up her actions of the evening? How did she know exactly where to go to find John?
Something else happens at the scene that seems to point to Karen Reed's guilt.
So there's this Google search. Jennifer McCabe's phone shows that she Googled "Haslong, a body to die in the cold," clearly written very quickly with typos in a Google search. And Jennifer McCabe says, I Googled that at 6:27 after we found John O'Keefe's body because Karen Reed asked me to.
Did Reed strike O'Keefe with her vehicle, leaving him there in the snow, hoping that police would assume that he'd stumbled out there and succumbed to hypothermia?
However, there's another theory of how John O'Keefe died that night.
The second theory on this case is that Karen Reed did not strike John O'Keefe, that it was actually an altercation in the home.
So does O'Keefe come to the Albert residence, make it inside without being seen, and have some sort of altercation with a partygoer? Brian Higgins was an ATF agent who was close personal friends with John O'Keefe, Karen Reed, and the Alberts. Higgins also had somewhat of a history with Karen Reed.
So Brian and Karen had this texting, flirty relationship in that month leading up to John O'Keefe's death. This may have led to some kind of heated altercation after a night of drinking.
Higgins is at the Waterfalls Bar and Grill that night, and he's encouraging O'Keefe to come to Albert's house later. Maybe he's trying to move in on Karen Reed. Maybe he's there because if John O'Keefe is out of the way, it kind of paves the road for him to get involved. Maybe it escalated.
Other questions surround the members of the Albert household. Could have O'Keefe had an altercation with the Alberts and Colin?
In fact, Brian Albert's nephew Colin was photographed with injuries on his knuckles less than a month after John's death. That may indicate he was in a fight. And an unexpected player emerges out of this fight theory.
Some of O'Keefe's injuries on his right arm look consistent with that of scratches or bites from a dog.
And the Alberts have a German Shepherd mix named Chloe that has a history of attacking strangers, and for whatever reason was rehoused a couple months after this incident took place. Chloe is just out of the picture.
If the altercation occurred inside the home, it is possible that John O'Keefe was pulled out through the basement. There was an egress from the basement and then pulled around to the front of the house and ultimately left in the driveway where he died.
Once outside, more questions arise about the pieces of taillight some say were found at the scene, and whether they came from Karen's SUV when she allegedly hit John O'Keefe, or did someone put those pieces there?
Doorbell camera video captures Reed backing into John O'Keefe's vehicle in their driveway. This was at 5:03 a.m., before John's body was found. Is this where the damage to the taillight occurred? If so, does this prove that law enforcement planted taillight at the scene?
So there's a unique element of this case, which is that this is all just a big police cover-up, that they are fabricating evidence, that they are planting evidence, that she is being framed, that this is really all a police kind of orchestrated conspiracy to protect their own, and that the police are really at fault here.
Part of that is the perfect storm of a lack of evidence in this case. No video of an incident outside the house that night. Many witnesses who had been drinking all night.
This case, it's very similar to the game of Clue. Was it the Alberts in the basement that killed John O'Keefe, or was it Karen Reed with the SUV? We have all these pieces and all of the players, but we're not yet sure who did what.
Karen Reed's trial for the alleged murder of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, begins on April 29, 2024 in Dedham, Massachusetts. A trial followed and watched by many across the country.
The defendant is charged with second-degree murder. She's also charged with manslaughter while operating under the influence and leaving the scene after causing personal injury or death.
The defendant stated repeatedly, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. The only true and just verdict based on that is that the defendant, Karen Reed, is guilty of murder in the second degree, striking the victim, Mr. O'Keefe, with her car, knocking him back onto the ground, and then leaving him there for several hours in a blizzard, with temperatures in the teens, wind swirling around, snow piling up on his body, until she comes with Mrs. McCabe and Mrs. Roberts just after 6 a.m.
Karen Reed was framed. Her car never struck John O'Keefe. She did not cause his death. And that means that somebody else did. You will learn that it was no accident that John O'Keefe was found dead on the front lawn of 34 Fairview Road. You will learn that at that address lived a well-known and well-connected law enforcement family in Canton, the Alberts. Because the Alberts were involved, and because they had close connections to the investigators in this case, Karen Reed was framed for a murder she did not commit.
Coming up, Karen Reed's trial gets people talking and taking sides inside the courtroom and in the court of public opinion.
Free Karen Reed!
Karen Reed said she hit John O'Keefe, and I believe her! I believe her! I believe Karen!
Hey, thanks so much for watching the Karen Reed case. We're going to get right back to it, but you might not know this, but one of the tools we use in producing our content is something called Truth Finder. It's one of our sponsors, and it's one of the largest public record search services in the United States, and you can use it to look up a lot of helpful information about people. It's not just for those of us in true crime. It can be an extra layer of security for any of you because you go on their website, truthfinder.com, you type in a name, and within minutes at a paid subscription purchase, you can access unlimited reports that could include information like phone numbers, location history, criminal and traffic records. Also, if you type in an address within a report, it can show you registered sex offenders that live in an area, which is just kind of wild to see. And right now you can get 50% off of confidential background reports. Just go to truthfinder.com/LCPrimeCrime.
We know who did it. We know. And we know who spearheaded this cover-up. You all know. I tried to save his life. Yeah. I tried to save his life at 6 in the morning. I was covered in his blood. I was the only one trying to save his life.
The prosecution in Karen Reed's trial for the murder of her Boston police officer boyfriend John O'Keefe begins with witnesses testifying about the couple's relationship.
I witnessed, one intense fight between the two of them. Alcohol had been involved. I recall her complaining that, he wasn't nice to her, or, something to that effect. And I was kind of the referee in that entire situation.
Many people have described that it was tumultuous towards the end of their relationship, a lot of fighting that had been induced by alcohol.
But interestingly enough, according to the defense, Karen Reed and him are fine.
When Miss Reed actually walked into the location, how Miss Reed and Mr. O'Keefe greeted each other. It appeared that was quite an affectionate greeting. Did you agree?
They kissed.
Mr. O'Keefe put his right arm out and Miss Reed sort of nestled into his embrace.
Okay.
And that's when he kissed her?
Yes.
As you see in the Waterfalls video, there's no big fight. There's no throwing drinks on somebody. There's no slapping. There's no shouting at the table. There's nothing. It just looks like a group of friends having fun, having drinks together, and then they leave.
It doesn't seem like the relationship is bad enough to prompt Reed to deliberately hit O'Keefe with her car, but could something have happened in the past that came to a head that night?
Now, Mr. Higgins, these are text messages from yourself and Miss Reed, is that correct?
Yes. Defendant responded, "You're hot." I responded, "Are you serious or messing with me?" Defendant responded, "No, I'm serious." I responded, "Failing is mutual. Is that bad? How long have you thought that?"
You have this kind of sub-narrative of Brian Higgins, and so he's kind of a player in this, even though his role, depending on who you ask, is very different. But it's very much alluded to in the way the defense is weaving the case.
My question is, were you or were you not sexually attracted to my client?
Yes.
Romantically attracted?
I'm not going to go there. No, I don't agree with that.
Of course you're not going to go there because that would put you in a very awkward position, wouldn't it, sir?
The defense seems to suggest Brian Higgins may have been so attracted to Karen Reed that he lured John O'Keefe to the afterparty, planning to get him out of the way. But was O'Keefe even at the party?
John O'Keefe or Karen Reed that you saw at the bar earlier that night, at any point in time on the evening of the 28th or the early morning of the 29th, did either of those people come in?
No, they never came into my home.
At any point in time, did you see John O'Keefe at that house, come into that house, around that house, at any point in time?
Never.
In fact, GPS tracking of John O'Keefe's phone supports the idea that he was never inside the house.
There was no GPS points ever showing inside the home, the backyard of the home.
In your opinion, sir, at any point in time, from the data that you reviewed, did Mr. O'Keefe enter 34 Fairview Road?
No, not at all.
Nobody saw John O'Keefe enter that home. Nobody can place John O'Keefe inside the home on January 28th. But then nobody sees him on the front lawn lying dead either.
When you looked out that window with that clear and good view, there was no body, was there?
I never saw a body.
Thank you.
I wish I had.
John O'Keefe, according to the prosecution, is there from about 12:30 onward, just laying in the snow for between 5 and 6 hours. All of these people leave the party at some point, and they just managed to walk right by where John O'Keefe was laying, and nobody saw him. David Yannetti, one of the defense attorneys, contacts the sanitation department, and he actually finds out that there is plowing that's done that night. He tracks down the actual Plow driver.
When you made that first pass by that residence at 2:45 in the morning, sir, with your headlights on, what, if anything, did you see on the front lawn in the area of the flagpole?
I saw nothing.
If there had been a 6'2", 200-pound man lying in the snow there, would you have seen it?
Yes.
Yet the prosecution points out that Karen Reed spots John O'Keefe's body as soon as she and her friends drive up to the Alberts house around 6 a.m.
We drive past the flagpole area, and all of a sudden, Karen starts screaming, "There he is, there he is."
After the officer arrives, what happened?
Karen just ran around screaming, "Is he dead? Is he dead?" It was on repeat. Could I have hit him? Did I hit him?
Why is Karen Reed, why is she asking it? Is she asking it because she's admitting that she hit him and trying to piece it together in her own head? Or is she, such a state of shock, trying to wonder when this could have happened, how this could have happened, and who could be responsible?
So she said,
I hit him. She repeated it, and there was a police officer who was in that vicinity kind of with us who replied, "You what?" She repeated it one more time.
While you were on scene at 34 Fairview for an hour and 40 minutes, did you ever once hear Karen Reed say, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him"?
I did not.
And you wrote a report regarding this, correct?
I did.
How many pieces of taillight did you find on or around that property?
That morning, none.
The cracked taillight really became another hyper-focused piece of this case, and the fragments from that taillight became really critical evidence later on as the investigation unfolded.
And then the investigation takes a bizarre turn.
Canton police officers, they then pull out a leaf blower to start trying to clear off pieces of snow to see if they can find anything, and they do not find any pieces of taillight. This is all around like 7, 8 a.m. that morning, so within the hours of John's body being found.
The fact that a lot of this evidence wasn't found until many days later supports the theory that there was somebody else was involved with this, that this wasn't Karen Reed.
And you began the process of removing layers of snow, in other words, dusting the area with a leaf blower.
That's correct.
Had you ever used a leaf blower in a crime scene preservation effort?
First time.
Police used a leaf blower to move snow away from the crime scene. Now, the problem with this is you could potentially move evidence away from its position, and that's critical in the investigation.
I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about the collection of the blood. You found what you thought was blood initially, right?
That's correct.
And you indicated your testimony was temporary evidence containers to collect that blood, correct?
Yep, we utilized cups, plastic cups.
Those were red Solo cups, right?
That's correct.
And where did you get those red Solo cups?
We got them from Lieutenant Kelleher.
They end up borrowing Solo cups from a nearby Canton police officer's home because they don't have any evidence collection items on them. They scoop up bloody pieces of snow into Solo cups and wrap them in Stop and Shop bags.
Do you think it's standard practice for a police department to borrow red Solo cups from a neighbor to gather evidence?
Of course not. Nothing about the scene was standard.
I've often said that every crime scene is a puzzle. But what happens when you can't trust the pieces you have? We're left trying to determine if the evidence is really showing a true picture of what occurred.
Almost 12 hours after John O'Keefe's body was found, the Massachusetts State Police take the case over from the Canton PD.
By about 5 o'clock that night, the state police CERT team, they do a more formal search where they use rakes and shovels to turn over pieces of snow. They end up finding multiple pieces of taillight. Everybody agrees that no taillight was found until the state police team came in.
I found multiple pieces of red and clear taillight.
You know approximately how many pieces of that were able to locate on that day?
I believe maybe 6 or 7 pieces.
A lot of the physical evidence wasn't collected until there had been some snow melting and some snow removal. And that's also concerning, particularly when the theory of the case is that Karen Reed was set up for this, that she was somehow a scapegoat for something else that happened.
Even experts couldn't agree on what happened to John O'Keefe. For example, a prosecution witness testified that John O'Keefe's injuries were in keeping with being struck by a vehicle.
Based on the evidence from the vehicle, based on the injuries to John O'Keefe, the taillight appears to be broken and it's sharp plastic pieces that could have ripped his arm, and also the dent with the scratches above it is consistent with a hand holding a glass smashed in the vehicle. You can see there's a line between scratches and a dent there.
But the defense called in their own expert.
Is the injury to the head that you saw consistent with having been struck by a vehicle?
It is not, no, sir. To get the injury, it was a fracture at the occipital region of the head, which is basically on the back bottom part of the head. So in order to have that part of the head contacted by the taillight, you would somehow have to have a configuration or be standing in a manner that the rest of your body doesn't get hit, because there's no other significant injuries to the body. So the fact that we only have that head injury and only damage to the occipital portion of the skull is inconsistent in this case with being struck by that taillight.
The defense pushes the theory that John O'Keefe was killed or badly injured during an altercation inside the Alberts' home. They suggest the police tried to protect their own by not investigating it properly.
You had an officer, Boston police officer, who was either dead or dying on the front lawn of a house with a bunch of occupants, and you didn't think that it was necessary to investigate or interview those occupants yourself?
No, I did not.
Nobody's going to his door to say, hey, do you know what happened here? Did you see anything? Was anybody in your home this evening? Was John O'Keefe in your home this evening? Nobody asked those questions that night at the scene.
Did you look around the house for any sign of a struggle or a fight?
No.
Did you go to the basement at all? No. Did you personally observe whether or not that house has a bulkhead door that services the basement?
I have no idea.
Inside the house, did you photograph any part of the house?
No.
John O'Keefe's body is found right outside the Alberts' house, and yet no investigation is done inside the house. The people at the party are not interviewed for quite some time. There's no observations conducted inside the house to see if there are signs of a struggle. Maybe we want to go in and just take a quick look around, see if anything looks out of place. And it's just not done.
Searching for answers, the defense team calls in an expert to evaluate some curious injuries on John's arm.
What is your opinion and conclusion concerning those injuries?
Those injuries appear to be consistent with an animal attack. Well, they are consistent with a large dog attack.
And the Alberts have a German Shepherd mix named Chloe that has a history of attacking strangers.
There's a combination of both what I consider bite wounds and scratch wounds on the arm. There were also some puncture wounds in that shirt.
Ms. Albert, you don't have Chloe anymore, do you?
Nope.
In May of 2022, 4 months after Mr. O'Keefe's death, you got rid of your family dog of 6 years.
I did not get rid of my dog, I rehomed my dog.
Your dog is no longer in the Canton area, correct?
No, but I know where she is. She's in Vermont. In that previous testimony, that information has all been given. So if she was ever needed for anything, we know where she is.
And there's another big question in this case.
So there's this big kind of dispute between the prosecution and the defense over this Google search.
Did you, in fact, use a phrase to Google search how long it takes for someone to die of extreme temperatures?
I did in the morning at the request of your client.
You see this first search that says how long to die in cold?
I do.
What's that time?
2:27 a.m.
Ms. McCabe, you made that search at 2:27 a.m. because you knew that John O'Keefe was outside in your sister's lawn dying in the cold, didn't you?
Absolutely not.
The defense wants it to be earlier in the morning because it's before Karen Reed called Jen McCabe to say John didn't come home. So that would suggest that Jen McCabe and the Alberts knew that John's body was out in the cold and that they were sort of like, oh, let's see how long he can stay out there before he dies kind of thing.
Ms. McCabe, the reason you deleted that 2:27 a.m. call is because you realized that if you were caught Googling how long it takes for a person to die in the cold 3.5 hours before John's body was found, that would incriminate you, wouldn't it?
Finally, the medical examiner who conducted John O'Keefe's autopsy takes the stand.
What did you list as cause of death on Mr. O'Keefe with regard to his death certificate?
Cause of death was blunt impact injuries of head and hypothermia.
And with reference to manner of death, what, if anything, did you list on Mr. O'Keefe's death certificate in relation to manner of death?
I listed could not be determined.
The thing that I can't wrap my head around with this case is the cause of death. So far, it's ruled undetermined. So how are you, if his death is undetermined, how do we charge somebody for it?
If it seems like everything about this trial has been confusing and shocking so far, coming up, lead investigator Michael Proctor takes the stand and takes it to a whole other level.
If you could Just read a series of responses from yourself.
From all accounts, he didn't do anything wrong. She's a whack job.
So these are your words, Trooper Proctor?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead and say them.
Hey, as you're watching this Karen Reed case, I think it becomes pretty obvious how important great lawyering is. And look, I can't talk about great lawyers without shouting out our incredible sponsor of Prime Crime, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Look, if you're hurt, this is a firm you may want in your corner. Over 1,000 attorneys, a dedicated team of investigators, specialists, paralegals, a track record of verdicts and settlements in the multi-millions, no upfront fee. The whole process can be done straight from your smartphone. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/primecrime.
What did you tell your colleagues that you were looking for as you sat looking through Karen Reed's phone?
No nudes so far.
No nudes so far, correct?
Correct.
And you said that to your bosses.
Yes, sir.
Several weeks into the trial of Karen Reed for the murder of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, lead investigator Michael Proctor takes the stand.
Somehow, Michael Proctor, who is known to the Alberts for a very long time, and they consider him a very good friend, somehow catches this case. And he becomes a much bigger part of the investigation than I think he ever really wanted to be.
The Massachusetts State Police trooper responds to a series of texts he exchanged with friends, family, and colleagues.
And what does he say in that text?
I'm sure the owner of the house will receive some.
And what is it that you respond?
My first response was nope. Homeowner is a Boston cop too.
What, if anything, were you saying, or what was the purpose of that text in regard to the homeowner?
I was just letting him know that essentially Mr. O'Keefe is a Boston cop and the homeowner was a Boston cop as well.
You knew at that time, Trooper Proctor, that this was not going to implicate in any way, shape, form, or fashion another cop, correct?
Correct.
Lead investigator Trooper Michael Proctor indicates through a series of text messages from his personal phone that he is in close alliance with law enforcement. He's clearly biased against Karen Reed and willing to cover for fellow law enforcement officers.
And then 5051 says, oh, she's skating, right?
Correct.
And what did you write after that?
My response was zero chance she skated.
And then what did you write?
She's
zero chance she skates. She's right?
Correct.
17 hours into this investigation, Trooper Proctor, you made the decision that you were going to put it on Miss Reed, didn't you? Put the case on Miss Reed. She was going to catch the case, correct? What you meant by that comment, Trooper Proctor, was I am going to make sure Miss Reed doesn't skate.
Michael Proctor, his testimony, his conduct in this investigation were incredibly damaging to the prosecution.
And from all accounts, the other decision that you made and the other determination you came to was my client, Karen Reed, was a whack job, right?
Yes.
What else did you say in response to she hot at least, question mark?
So following that text, I responded, yeah, she's a babe. Weird Fall River accent, though. No ass.
Yeah, she's a babe. Who's the she?
Miss Reed.
Think that's appropriate?
Absolutely not.
The jurors' reactions to Michael Proctor's testimony were visible. When he was reading those text messages, you could see reactions from jurors to the awful text that he had sent about Karen Reed.
The rest of the unprofessional and regrettable comments are something I'm not proud of, and I shouldn't have wrote in a private or any type of setting.
On June 25th, 2024, after 2 months, Karen Reed's trial comes to a close.
Ladies and gentlemen, there was a cover-up in this case, plain and simple. What evidence do they actually have to prove that that SUV ever hit John? The answer is none, and John's injuries did not come from being hit by a car. So how are those injuries properly explained? The evidence is simple. John got into an altercation. He got hit, and he fell to the ground, fracturing his skull. At some point during that altercation, the dog got a hold of him. Every single injury is explained by that. Given what we know about the facts and the physical evidence in this case, the actual truth in this case, how did this happen? How did we end up here? We ended up here because of relationships and building a tall blue wall.
I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. Those are the words of the defendant 4 times. You heard testimony from 4 different witnesses. Text messages from Trooper Proctor are unprofessional, they're indefensible, they're inexcusable. However, I submit they had no bearing whatsoever or impact whatsoever on the integrity of the entirety of the investigation. What do you not see in those text messages? You don't see any discussion or any illusion of any conspiracy, of any framing of the defendant, of any planting of any evidence. No evidence whatsoever. Why? Because it didn't happen. There is no conspiracy, there is no cover-up, there is no evidence of any of that.
The jury deliberates for more than 20 hours over 5 days. Then, something unusual happens.
They told the judge they were deadlocked. I write this very articulate jury note about how they are just at an impasse. They cannot come to a decision.
Judge Canoni, despite our rigorous efforts, we continue to find ourselves at an impasse. Our perspectives on the evidence are starkly divided. The deep division is not due to a lack of effort or diligence, but rather a sincere adherence to our individual principles and moral convictions. To continue to deliberate would be futile and only serve to force us to compromise these deeply held beliefs. I'm not going to do that to you folks. Your service is complete. I'm declaring a mistrial in this case.
I wasn't surprised by the mistrial, in fact, anticipated it. And the reason being that this case has been so polarizing. People either feel really strongly that she did it, or they feel really strongly that it was a cover-up.
What's the vibe like out here today?
It's hostile. I'm here today to stand up for the O'Keefe family, the McCabe family, the Albert family, and the Roberts family. They have become victims in this terrible game that Karen Reed is playing.
Well, I was disappointed that the jury couldn't come to a verdict. Based on what I've seen of the trial and watching all the pre-trial hearings and stuff, it was very evident that Karen Reed did not do this.
But the Karen Reed story didn't end there. In a press release, the Commonwealth announced it intends to retry the case, and Reed's lawyers announced they were in it to win it.
I'm not from Texas like my colleagues here. I'm a Boston kid, but I'll repeat what he said, which is, we ain't got no quit.
And if you thought that was the end of the twists in this case, not quite.
Since the end of the trial, Massachusetts State Police has issued a statement that Trooper Michael Proctor has been relieved of duty.
If this case is retried, Proctor continues to be their poison apple. He continues to be a real liability to them, but at the same time, they very much need Proctor because he was the lead investigator on this case.
Now, 2 additional Massachusetts state troopers involved in the case are also the subjects of an internal investigation. And in a case filled with them, there's one more major twist. Reed's defense attorneys filed a motion to dismiss the case.
It seems that some of the jurors reached out to the defense attorneys and said, well, actually, we were unanimous on some of the charges, just not all of them. In fact, on the second-degree murder charge and leaving the scene of an accident, we were all unanimous to acquit. And that's very significant because under double jeopardy law in this country, once there is a final resolution to a charge, you cannot be retried on it.
Led by a new face, Martin Weinberg, that's exactly what Reed's defense team argued at a dismissal hearing on August 9th, 2024.
Stop her re-prosecution, because that would be a horror to make her convince 24 jurors of her innocence, a second 12 when she's already convinced the first 12.
But 2 weeks later, Judge Canoni denied the motion to dismiss.
No matter where this case goes, the O'Keefe family and the Reed family, they are forever changed.
Despite a trial that lasted over 2 months, this case still raises more questions than answers, and it likely isn't over yet. But the bottom line is, a beloved Boston police officer is dead, and the children he had been caring for are left without a father figure once again. That's all we have for you here on this episode of Prime Crime. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jesse Weber, and as always, stay safe.